Well, you might as well ride along with us.
I'm glad we all learned something today, kids. Now let's dance!
Holy diver, you've been down too long in the midnight sea. Oh, what's becoming of me?
Y'all can dance if you want to.
You cannot defeat Christians by killing them. Their spirit persists in heaven.
Let me be the judge of that. I am tired of the same old faces, the same old thing. My government does not like to do laundry in public.
This place is coming like a ghost town. Bands won't play no more. Too much fighting on the dance floor.
When the Bible, ladies and gentlemen, uses symbolic language, a, quote, woman, unquote, can often symbolize a church. The true church, for example, is likened to a bride, a chaste virgin, a woman without spot or blemish. Check Ephesians chapter 5, verse 27, and Revelations chapter 19, verses 7 and 8. But in striking contrast to the true church, the woman of the text is spoken of as an unclean woman, a defiled woman, a harlot. If it is correct to apply this symbolism to a church system, ladies and gentlemen, then it becomes clear that only a defiled and fallen church could be meant. In big capital letters, the Bible calls her, quote, Mystery Babylon, unquote. Now when John wrote the book of Revelation, Babylon as a city had already been destroyed and left in ruins, as the Old Testament prophets had foretold. And you can find that in Isaiah chapter 13, verses 19 through 22, and Jeremiah chapter 51, verse 52. But though the city of Babylon was destroyed, folks, religious concepts and customs that originated in Babylon continued on and were well represented in many nations of the world and exist in secret right up to this very day. Now, just what was the religion of ancient Babylon? How did it all begin, and what significance does it hold in modern times? How does it all tie in with what John wrote in the book of Revelation, if at all? How many of you were aware that the Iraqis have been busy for many years rebuilding the city of Babylon? Turning the pages of time back to the period shortly after the flood, men began to migrate from the east. And it came to pass, as they journeyed from the east, that they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. Genesis chapter 11, verse 2. It was in this land of Shinar that the city of Babylon was built, and this land became known as Babylonia, and later as Mesopotamia. Originally, it was a part of the Assyrian nation. Now here, ladies and gentlemen, is where the Euphrates and Tigris rivers had built up rich deposits of earth that could produce crops in great abundance. But there were certain problems, you see, the people faced. For one thing, the land was overrun with wild animals, which were a constant threat to the safety and peace of the inhabitants. And you can check for reference Exodus chapter 23, verses 29 and 30. Obviously, anyone who could successfully provide protection from these wild beasts would receive great acclaim from the people. For all people in all times seek security. It was at this point that a large, powerfully built man by the name of Nimrod appeared on the scene. He became famous as a mighty hunter against the wild animals. And the Bible tells us, quote, "And Cush begat Nimrod. He began to be a mighty one in the earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Wherefore it is said, even as Nimrod, the mighty hunter before the Lord," unquote. Genesis chapter 10, verses 8 and 9. Now apparently Nimrod's success as a mighty hunter caused him to become famous among those primitive people. He became a, quote, mighty one, unquote, in the earth, a famous leader in worldly affairs. Gaining this prestige, he devised a better means of protection. Instead of constantly fighting the wild beasts, why not organize the people into cities and surround them with walls for protection? Then, why not organize these cities into a kingdom? What a great idea. Evidently, this was the thinking of Nimrod, for the Bible tells us that he organized just such a kingdom. Quote, "And the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, and Erech, and Akkad, and Calneh, in the land of Shinar." Unquote. Genesis chapter 10, verse 10. The kingdom of Nimrod is the very first government mentioned in the Bible. Whatever advances may have been made by Nimrod would have been well and good, but Nimrod, you see, was an ungodly ruler. The name Nimrod, ladies and gentlemen, comes from marad and means, quote, "he rebelled," unquote. Sound familiar? Wasn't Lucifer, an angel of light, tremendous knowledge, who rebelled against God and was thrown down to the earth to be the ruler of the material world? Well, the word Nimrod means, quote, "he rebelled," unquote. The expression that he was a mighty one, quote, "before the Lord," unquote, can carry a hostile meaning. You see the word before being sometimes used as meaning against the Lord. The Jewish Encyclopedia says that Nimrod was he who made all the people rebellious against God. That's taken directly out of the Jewish Encyclopedia. Let me say it again for you. Quote, "he who made all the people rebellious against God," unquote. The noted historian Josephus wrote, "Now it was Nimrod who excited them to such an affront and contempt of God. He also gradually changed the government into tyranny, seeing no other way of turning men from the fear of God. The multitudes were very ready to follow the determination of Nimrod, and they built a tower, neither sparing any pains nor being in any degree negligent about the work. And by reason of the multitude of hands employed in it, it grew very high. The place wherein they built the tower is now called Babylon, and those who built it were called the builders." And they still exist, ladies and gentlemen, today. Basing his conclusions on information that has come down to us throughout history, legend, and in mythology, a man by the name of Alexander Hislop has written in detail of how Babylonian religion developed around traditions concerning Nimrod, his wife Semiramis, and her child Tammuz. Now, Alexander Hislop wrote this, the results of his research, in a book called The Two Babylons, and I suggest strongly that you make every attempt to get that book and read it. It will open your eyes if you have an understanding of the symbology of the esoteric religion of Mystery Babylon and the secret societies today, which I have revealed to you through the Mystery Babylon series on this radio broadcast. It is important that we understand who these people are and what they believe. It makes no difference whatsoever whether you believe it or disbelieve it. If they hold the powerful positions of the world, if they are pulling the strings that make you dance, then whatever they believe affects you. Make no mistake about that. Now, when Nimrod died, according to the old stories, his body was cut into pieces, burnt, and sent to various areas. Sound familiar? We've discussed this same story before. You see, the first religion is also the last religion, and it has been every religion in between, in various aspects and various forms. It has never changed. His body was cut into pieces, burnt, and sent to various areas. Similar practices are mentioned even in the Bible. Judges chapter 19, verse 29, 1 Samuel chapter 11, verse 7. And following his death, which was greatly mourned by the people of Babylon, his wife Semiramis claimed he was now the sun god, S-U-N, sun god. Later, when she gave birth to a son, she claimed that her son, spelled S-O-N, Tammuz by name, was their hero Nimrod, reborn. And this, again, has been played out throughout the mysteries and throughout every religion throughout the history of the world. Now, don't misunderstand me, ladies and gentlemen. I am by no means casting any slant or dispersion on any religion that any of you may be practicing. And I'm making no suggestions that you should not be a part of whatever religion you belong to. I'm merely delivering a message of the truth to you all. The mother, excuse me, the mother of Tammuz had probably heard the prophecy of the coming Messiah to be born of a woman, for this truth was known from the earliest times, and you can check Genesis chapter 3 verse 15. She claimed her son was supernaturally conceived, and that he was the promised seed, the Savior, and she gave the first recorded virgin birth to her son, who was Nimrod, reborn from his wife, lover, mother. Tammuz was the child's name, and he was called the promised seed, or the Savior. In the religion that developed, however, not only was the child worshipped, but the mother was worshipped also. Much of the Babylonian worship was carried on through mysterious symbols. You see, it was a mystery religion. The golden calf, for example, was a symbol of Tammuz, son of the sun god, Nimrod. The calf, or the bull, was actually the symbol during that age of the astrological house through which the sun was moving. It was called, and still is called, Taurus, the bull. Later, when the sun moved out of the house of Taurus and into the house of Capricorn, then the golden calf became the ram, or the goat, and was worshipped in the temple of Mendes, and to this day it is known as the goat of Mendes. Now, every once in a while I slow down for you to make sure that this sinks in, that you really understand what I am telling you. For it is important, ladies and gentlemen, that we stop being deceived and led by our nose. Those who are the puppet masters rely upon us to remain puppets. It is my intention to bring you out of the toy box and into the real world. Since Nimrod was believed to be the sun god, or Baal, fire was considered as his earthly representation. Fire was considered as his earthly representation. Thus, as you shall see, folks, candles and ritual fires were lighted in his honor, and the priesthood was known as the philosophers of fire. They had a habit of burning their enemies, and they still do that today. In other forms, Nimrod was symbolized by sun images, by fish, by trees, by pillars or obelisks, and animals. For you see, if he was the sun god, he was the source of all life on this earth. He was the source of all warmth. He was the source of all energy. He was the generative force, and his symbol was the phallus, or the obelisk. One was erected by our forefathers in Washington, D.C. Centuries later, Paul gave a description which perfectly fits the course that the people of Babylon followed. Quote, "When they knew God, they glorified him not as God, but became vain in their imaginations, and their foolish heart was darkened. Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools, and changed the glory of the uncorruptible God into an image made like to corruptible man, and to birds and four-footed beasts and creeping things. They changed the truth of God into a lie, and worshipped and served the creature more than the Creator. For this cause God gave them up into vile affections." Unquote. Romans chapter 1, verses 21 through 26. Ladies and gentlemen, this system of idolatry spread from Babylon to the nations. Do you know what nations translates to in the original Hebrew and Greek? It is the word that we know as Gentiles. You see, the nations are the Gentiles. Does that surprise you? So the Gentiles were not corrupted until this system of idolatry spread from Babylon to the nations, to the Gentiles. For it was from this location that men were scattered over the face of the earth. You can find that in Genesis chapter 11, verse 9. "And as they went from Babylon, they took their worship of the mother and child and the various mystery symbols with them." And the mother was known as the goddess of the sea at a later time. The sea was called the mare, and the goddess was called Mary. Herodotus, the world traveler and historian of antiquity, witnessed the mystery religion and its rites in numerous countries, and mentions how Babylon was the primeval source from which all systems of idolatry flowed. Bunsen says that the religious system of Egypt was derived from Asia and the primitive empire in Babel. In his noted work, folks, Nineveh and its Remains, Layard declares that we have the united testimony of sacred and profane history that idolatry originated in the area of Babylonia, the most ancient of religious systems, and all of these historians were quoted by Hislop in his book, The Two Babylons. When Rome became a world empire, it is a known fact that she assimilated into her system the gods and religions from the various pagan countries over which she ruled. Since Babylon was the source of the paganism of these countries, we can see how the early religion of pagan Rome was but the Babylonish worship that had developed into various forms and under different names in the countries to which it had gone. Now, bearing this in mind, folks, we notice that it was during this time, when Rome ruled the world, that the true Savior, Jesus Christ, was born, lived among men, died, and rose again. He ascended into heaven, sent back the Holy Spirit, and the New Testament church was established in the earth. Now, looking at those early days of the Christian church, all of the members were saints. They were all equal unto each other. All of them. It must have been glorious to be a part of that and break away from the old to something that gave a promise of a better life. You see, in those days, life was terrible. It was uncertain at best. No one knew when they woke up in the morning if they would live to see the nightfall. And it was that uncertain every single day. And all of a sudden, there was a promise. There was a promise. You only have to read the book of Acts to see how much God blessed his people in those days. Multitudes, ladies and gentlemen, were added to the church, the true church. It doesn't exist anywhere today except in small pockets of individuals who meet with each other in Christ's name. All of these organized religions have bastardized the teachings of Christ, have corrupted the teachings of Jesus, and most of them are helping to lead you into slavery in the New World Order. In those days, great signs and wonders were performed as God confirmed His word with signs following. True Christianity, ladies and gentlemen, anointed by the Holy Spirit, swept the world like a prairie fire. Nothing could stop it. No matter how many Christians the emperor crucified, no matter how many Christians were thrown to the animals in the Roman circus, 100-fold sprang up to take their place. This movement encircled the mountains and crossed the oceans. It made kings tremble and tyrants fearful. And it was said of those early Christians that they had turned the world literally upside down, so powerful was their message and spirit. Now, I am talking about the true Christian teachings of Jesus Christ and the way that it was followed in the early days of Christ's church. Not Rome's church, not Baptist church, not Lutheran's church, not Orthodox church, but Christ's church. Before too many years had passed, men began to set themselves up as lords over God's people in places of the Holy Spirit, instead of conquering by spiritual means and by truth. Not too many people in the world understand what truth even means today. As in the early days, men began to substitute their ideas and their methods in place of the teachings that Christ gave us. The Inquisition came from these people, not from Jesus Christ. The Crusades came from these people, not from Jesus Christ. Attempts to merge paganism into Christianity were being made even in the days when our New Testament was being written, folks, for Paul mentioned that the mystery of iniquity was already at work. And he warned that there would come a falling away, and some would depart from the faith, giving heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils, the counterfeit doctrines of the pagans. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 3 through 7, 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 2. And by the time that Jude wrote the book that bears his name, it was necessary for him to exhort the people to earnestly contend for the faith that was once delivered unto the saints. For certain men had crept in who were attempting to substitute things that were no part of the original faith. Check Jude chapter 1, verses 3 and 4. Christianity, folks, came face to face with the Babylonian paganism in its various forms that had been established in the Roman Empire. The early Christians refused to have anything to do with its customs and beliefs. And we all know what happened. Much persecution resulted. Many Christians were falsely accused, thrown to the lions, burned at the stake, and in other ways tortured and martyred. And for their own safety, they went underground in the catacombs and in the caves, and they formed their own secret society, which was known then as the Friendly Open Secret Society, and their symbol to mark their way was a fish. Then great changes began to be made. The Emperor of Rome professed conversion to Christianity. He had to. For Rome would have fallen just as sure as a tree of the real church, Christ's church, who practiced exactly what he taught them. Great changes began to take place that have affected us right up to this very day. What a shock it must have been when Constantine professed a conversion to Christianity after stating that he had seen the vision of a cross in the sky. And some accounts say that he didn't see it in the sky during daylight, that he saw it in a dream. And ladies and gentlemen, because he never accepted Christ during his entire life, and in fact was a pagan sun worshiper, I question whether he ever saw a cross at all. You see, because history says and records very clearly that Constantine never accepted Christ as his Savior. He never really followed the teachings of Christ. He was, in fact, a sun worshiper. He practiced the mystery religion of Babylon. But he was, in fact, the emperor of Rome. Rome very quickly became, ladies and gentlemen, the Catholic Church, and the Roman emperor became the Pope. He had to do this to save the empire. The symbol of the Roman Empire and the emperor was the double-headed eagle. It signified that he ruled over both the East and the West, that the sun did not set on the Roman Empire. This symbol still is displayed upon the walls of the Vatican, and just recently Russia adopted this symbol as its national symbol. It is the symbol of the 33rd degree of Freemasonry. And I could go on and on and on and on and on and on and on, but hopefully you get the point. Imperial orders, ladies and gentlemen, went forth throughout the Roman Empire that persecutions should cease. Simply and quickly cease. Bishops were created and given high honors. The church began to receive worldly recognition and power. But for all of this, a great price had to be paid. Many compromises were made, ladies and gentlemen, with paganism. Instead of the church being separate from the world, it became a part of this world system. The emperor, showing favor, demanded a place of leadership in the church. For in paganism, emperors were believed to be gods. So from here on, wholesale mixtures of paganism into Christianity were made, especially at Rome. We believe the information that you're going to receive, and have received, in fact, over this broadcast, will convince you that what is known today as the Roman Catholic Church is nothing less than the old Roman Empire transformed, and the old Roman pantheon of gods became the pantheon of saints. And the Christian, who began as a saint equal with all of his brothers and sisters, became a lowly peon once again. The title of saint was stripped from him and from her, and someone began to pass a plate and put up collection boxes and demand that at festivals the wealth of the people be transferred into the coffers of the church. Now, I don't doubt that there are many fine, sincere, and devout Catholics. In fact, I know there are. I know there are many devout, sincere, courageous, wonderful members of the Mormon Church, and the Baptist Church, and the Lutheran Church, and the Orthodox Church, and even the Buddhist religion, and Hinduism. I've met these people all over the world. We have all, ladies and gentlemen, been deceived throughout our lives by the secular and the religious priesthood, and in many cases they are the same. They are now engaged in a grand plan to bring about a new world order. The mystery schools, who try to keep the mysteries pure, want to rule the world through a council of elders with a puppet, charismatic, religious, and political leader upon the throne of the world. And the Vatican wants the Pope to sit upon the throne of the world and rule without the council of elders. You see, they're all united in the efforts to bring about world government. The only point of contention is who is going to rule. And we're the odd card, the joker in the deck. For if we want to, we could decide that neither one of them will rule, and we could determine the outcome of this battle, and we could reinstitute the real church again upon this earth as it was when Jesus taught it. He did not teach us to war against our neighbor. He did not teach us to condemn or judge our neighbor. In fact, the commandment was, "Judge not, lest ye shall be judged." When Jesus spoke to a crowd and someone walked away from the crowd, he did not chase them down the road and try to stuff his teachings down their throat. Ladies and gentlemen, he did not do that. Neither did he build great, wealthy cathedrals built of shining glass with great pageants on the holidays and big-name stars to come and sing and perform in these pageants, where a homeless person or a poor, unemployed man with dirty clothes would be turned away from the door. Jesus Christ would have been the first one who welcomed that person into the church. And if you will look at the people that he habitually associated with, whose homes he slept in, who became his disciples, you will understand that those today who call themselves Christians do not even know the meaning of the word. Do not even know the meaning of the word. Many of the ministers, pastors, who stand at our pulpits across this nation and preach the word of God on Sunday, attend the rituals of the Masonic Lodge on the following Saturday, and pay homage to Lucifer. How can this be? How can this be? Now, folks, it's not my intention to treat lightly or to ridicule anyone whose beliefs we may here disagree with. I will be the first one to stand by your side and protect your right to worship at the altar of your choice anytime anyone threatens to take that away from you. Whether I agree with your method of worship, or your church, or your altar. For I believe sincerely that only by protecting your right to worship at the altar of your choice is my right to worship at the altar of my choice protected. Only by allowing you to speak what you wish to speak is my right to speak what I must speak protected. And everywhere I go, I see Christians who do not practice that at all, yet they claim to be Americans and support the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and claim to be following the teachings of Jesus Christ. And they are not. They are false Christians. And I think that someday when they go to knock on that door that they're all looking forward to passing through, they will find that it is shut and barred and locked against them. I hope that this program tonight inspires people, regardless of their church affiliation, to forsake all the stupid dogma and silly interpretations and the fractures that have created thousands of different divisions of what is supposed to be one church across this nation. Forsake the Babylonian doctrines and concepts and seek a return to the faith that was once delivered unto the saints, the real saints. Not, ladies and gentlemen, the Roman pantheon of gods. I hope tomorrow night to be able to bring the guest who was supposed to be on tonight. He may have called later because the phone was ringing, but once I get into something, I carry it through to the finish. I cannot start something and leave it in the middle. I think tonight's message was important. It was important to me to be able to deliver it. This is not a religious program, folks. It's about lies and deception. It's about the truth. And the truth is, very few people know the truth or practice the truth. Most so-called Christians spend most of their life calling Jesus Christ a liar. They've so twisted his teachings, his simple teachings. They've so turned around everything that is said. They so reach out to find verses in the Bible to promote their own agenda, whatever it may be. And all through the work, they steal from their neighbors and piously attend church on Sunday. And this must stop. It must stop. All of the lies must stop. All of the deceptions must stop. All of the manipulations must stop. We must begin to use our brains, tempered with our hearts, for cold reason is cruel and intrepid. Those who believe that there's no place in this world or within humanity for emotion are the despots of the world. Conversely, those who believe that the heart should dictate everything are the fools of the world. Man, after all, as the ancients left us the symbol of the Sphinx to remind us, is nothing but an animal with a brain, and we spend most of our time in conflict between the animal instinct and the brain, between the emotions and desires and temptations and what we know to be right, between the forces of good and the forces of evil. Too few of us are winning these battles, ladies and gentlemen. Too few of us really care. Too few of us really understand the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Too many of us are fat and lazy and apathetic and ignorant, pampered, spoiled, rotten. America must change. The change must occur in the people. The people must once again understand what is important and what is not. They must be willing to sacrifice. They must be willing to do whatever is necessary to make sure that the freedom that man has gained throughout his history, culminating in the greatest nation upon the face of this earth, does not disappear from the face of this earth in the name of some promised world utopian government. For anything, ladies and gentlemen, that is created from a mountain of lies to sit upon top of a mountain of lies is nothing but another mountain of lies. And as soon as the truth upon which this mountain is sitting is exposed, the entire thing will come tumbling down. A world brought about by liars through deceit and manipulation cannot be a good thing, will not be a good thing. And those who behind it, who profess to be doing what's best for man, who profess to be acting with the best intentions for the future of mankind, belie that statement when it comes out of the same mouth that promotes the lies, that creates the deceptions, that manipulates the people into it. For if it were going to be so good, no lies would be required, no deceptions would be required, no manipulations would have to take place. Now, all of you who are waiting for Jesus to come into his kingdom, I tell you, he is in his kingdom now. The problems with this world lie with man, have always been with man, and will be with man no matter what he tries to create, and no matter how he tries to create it. If it is built by man, it is flawed. The concept that we're going to have a perfect utopian world government where imperfect men are ruled by imperfect men is ludicrous. Absolutely, 100% ludicrous. I want to thank you all for putting up with my demented ravings tonight. I'm kind of glad that our guest didn't show up, because this is something that's been burning within me for quite some time. For reference, read Alexander Hislop's The Two Babylons and Babylon, Mystery Religion, Ancient and Modern by Woodrow. Refer to the 33 tapes of our Mystery Babylon series that were aired on this broadcast over the last 2 years. Good luck, good night, and God bless you.
His will, even if he has departed from an individual. A Christian is not to engage in revenge, as vengeance is the Father's. That does not mean that a Christian will not sin, and that those sins are not ordained through belief in Christ and submission to God the Father through Christ Jesus. We know society is not getting bad. It is bad, and it's always been bad. The people before us were tricked in the exact same ways, with fake wars and conflicts, division over the wrong things, and unification of any type under the wrong things, which are easily turned into a false flag.
concealment or meditation, known as kilowatt, or silence. During this time, he was to receive the illumination, which was emanated from the Supreme Being, who desired a class of perfect men and women to carry out the organization and direction of the world. Bayezid collected in this way, over a period of 3 years, about 50 staunch disciples, whom he had trained in obedience, and to whom, so we are told, he had shown a way whereby they could liberate their inner powers. Well, this meant that they were ready to follow his further instructions. These orders, according to what his opponents say, were that the whole sect would now become bandits, to prey upon the rest of the world, and all those who could not identify themselves by their secret sign were their legal and lawful prey. Little information is available from the other side, but 3 letters said to have been written from one branch to another contain in outline a plan to reshape the entire social system of the world, first taking control of individual countries one by one. And where have we heard that before? We've heard it from every one of the histories of all of these different sects of Mystery Babylon, which on the outward appearance seem to be different from each other. But on the esoteric level, are one and the same religion, with one and the same plan, with one and the same goal, all working toward that end. And the end always justifies the means. Now, something does survive of the degrees of initiation. The first was salik, or seeker, followed by murid, disciple, fakir, humble devotee, arif, enlightened one, khwaja, master, emir, commander, imam, priest, and malik, chief or king. This succession does not follow the usual pattern of promotion in the Muslim mystical secret societies, the tariqas, and seems to have been specially devised for this one. In the first 3 degrees, the candidate perfected himself by repetitions of certain phrases which were believed to carry power. Examples are these: Rabba, Afrina'a, Heya, Hafida, Kwawaya. Of these words, all Arabic or Persian. The first stands for the concept of lordship, the second for creation, the third for life, the fourth for protection, and the last for absolute power. If they were repeated with deep meditation upon various forms of their manifestations in human life, it was believed the appropriate power would come into the devotee. Now, no special deity was worshipped, but it was believed that there was a supreme overall power, which was known by the sum of its individual powers, lordship, protection, and so on, a type of pantheism which works its way into the modern mystical societies of today. And that when one had meditated upon them all, and they had become the property of the invocant, he would thenceforward be a man of complete power. Now, folks, this kind of idea underlies a good deal of religious and magical thinking in many faiths, though it is seldom put in as concise a manner. The enlightened one of the 4th degree was he who could attain, during the rituals, complete identification with this overall power, and was guided by it in all that he did. It was said that he could communicate directly with the unknown or hidden supervisors. Now, this meant that, apart from the guidance of the chief, he was free to suit his own pleasure in life. No theological or social bonds limited him. It is at this stage, said the illuminated, that the Arif could perform acts of wonder and magic, influence the physical world, and know the secrets of others. He attained this degree through the acceptance of him by the master, to whom he had confided his dreams and mystical ecstasies. The master alone really knew whether these were true or false experiences, and promoted him accordingly. Some people proceeded to the higher degrees without going through all the lower ones, because they were helped by the spirits of former illuminists who had died. The master, emir, imam, and malik degrees were reserved for the very highest men and women initiates. After the 5th degree, the segregation of the sexes in rituals was no longer practiced. Anyone of the degree of imam and higher could start his own lodge and make his own disciples. Bayezid decided to move his headquarters into the most inaccessible mountains of Afghanistan, where he set up a large and luxurious castle, and from which he directed his military and bandit operations designed to overcome the rest of the East. His missionaries were sent far and wide, but received little official support. The cult did, however, spread among merchants and soldiers who thought that this gateway to mystical experiences was something to enter. They contributed lavishly to the chief's upkeep and his most expensive military, political, and espionage system. The heady wine of this success seems to have affected the prudence of the head illuminate more strongly than it should, for his claims became more and more extreme in public, as most usually do. There was, he now preached, no afterlife of the kind currently believed in, no reward or punishment, only a spirit state which was completely different from earthly life. The spirits, if they belonged to the order, could continue to enjoy themselves and be earthly powers, acting through living members, but that was all. The preaching of this spiritual vampirism seemed to delight his followers as much as it infuriated his enemies, because Bayezid now gave out more and more of the new doctrine based upon his no afterlife creed. Eat, drink, be merry, gain power, look after yourself. You have no allegiance except to the order, he told them, and all humanity which cannot identify itself by our secret sign is our lawful prey. The secret signal was to pass a hand over the forehead, palm inwards, the countersign to hold the ear with the fingers and support the elbow in the cupped other hand. And you can see that sign be exchanged even today in the courts of law all over the United States of America between lawyers and judges, defendants and judges, prosecutors and judges, prosecutors and defending lawyers, etc., etc., etc. Bayezid took to himself the style of Pir Aroshan, or Sage of Illumination, and founded a city at Hashnagar, which was to be the center from which Illuminism was to spread all over the world. Now, each member of his following was given a new name upon entry. Does that sound familiar? And this name depended upon the guild to which he in theory belonged. According to Bayezid, all humanity was divided into professions. His were lamp makers. Some members were the makers, others sold lamps. Some were known as this kind of lamp, some another. Lamp of the darkness was a typical example. Among the other guilds noted are those of the builders. Does that sound familiar? Soldiers, merchants of various kinds, and scribes. They can be found today in organizations such as the American Medical Association or the American Bar Association, etc., etc. Writing in the 19th century, an Afghan scholar who was by no means fond of the Society of the Roshaniya claimed that they were, in fact, an organization devoted to fighting against the tyranny of the Moguls, and that the banditry and strange doctrines attributed to them were untrue, allegations by interested parties. He based this upon 2 manuscript copies of the objectives of the order, which seem to have stated that it was dedicated to influencing people of importance throughout the East and West towards greater justice and self-training into the immense capacities of the human mind, whereby wonders can be caused and through which the harmony of the world will be established. Now, these ideas are taken from those enshrined in our ancient literature and practices, as well as those of the Persians, many of whom followed the true illuminated path before the new message was revealed, they stated. In the end, the imperial mogul decided that something must be done about the widespread power of the militant mystics of the Hindu Kush mountains. The governor of Kabul arrested Bayezid, clapped him in irons, and paraded him through the streets to show that here was no supernatural being. To give further point to the proceedings, his hair and beard were half-shaved, but this governor, Moshin Khan, was under the ascendancy of his religious guide, one Sheikh Atari, who may even have been a secret adherent of the Illuminated One, for the cult was spreading with rapidity. In any case, he told the governor that Bayezid was undoubtedly a man of great and holy attainments, and that considerable suffering would inevitably attend anyone who treated this man harshly. Bayezid was allowed to escape. The indignities to which he had been subjected kindled his illuminism still higher. Calling his numerous companions, he retired to tribal Tehra, where he set up a military and court atmosphere which is still remembered for its glamour, fervor, and mystery. India and Persia were to be overcome by force of arms, he announced. To that end, many more were to be enrolled into the ranks of the illuminated. Enthusiastic scenes throughout Afghanistan resulted from the proclamation, which was carried far and wide to the accompaniment of kettle drums and wild sword dances. And when he was ready, Bayezid, attended by his halqa, or circle of dervishes, led the campaign into the lush land of India. Intercepted by the Moshin Khan, whom he had earlier escaped, he was wounded, put to flight, and he eventually died as a result of this encounter. His son, Omar Ansari, proclaimed himself leader, and immediately ordered an attack upon the Pathan tribe of the Yusufzai, who had allied themselves with the Mughal. He was killed by the hillman, and his own son, quote, the servant of the one, unquote, took over the leadership. And by the middle of the 17th century, this youth had been killed defending his castle against a Mughal expeditionary force. His infant son escaped with some of his followers into Afghanistan proper, where the cult was restarted. The descendants of this Abdul Kedar, servant of the powerful, continued to rule the fanatics and to send their teachers far and wide. The creed eventually split into two divisions, the military and the religious, and nowadays it is only the followers of the latter who survive, still a secret cult which might, given the right conditions, have touched off a movement as important as that of the assassins. Now, 40 years after the last religio-military leader of the Afghan Illuminated Ones died, a society of the same name, the Illuminati, came into being in Germany, formed, it is said, by Adam Weishaupt. The young Jesuit priest, a professor of canon law at the Jesuit Ingolstadt University. Coincidences of date and beliefs connect these Bavarian Illuminati with the Afghan ones, and also with the other cults which called themselves Illuminated. In actual fact, they are all the same. The beginning of the 17th century saw the foundation of the Illuminated Ones of Spain, the Alumbrados, condemned in an edict of the Grand Inquisition in 1623. Out of which the condemned Ignatius Loyola emerged as a man immune to prosecution, arrest, or accusation from any king, prince, or prelate, as the head of one of the most powerful secret societies ever organized, the Society of Jesus, now known as the Jesuits. Ignatius Loyola had been the leader of the Alumbrados in Spain, and it was his sect, the Illuminated Ones, or the Alumbrados, which became the Society of Jesus. In 1654, the Illuminated Guernets came into public notice in France. Now, documents still extant show several points of resemblance between the German and Central Asian Illuminists. points which are hard to account for on the grounds of pure coincidence, and yet which still might, one supposes, be nothing more than that. The Prophet Muhammad, for example, is claimed as an initiate by the Western Illuminati. Their calendar is the very same which survived in current usage in the former Iranian territories among the Afghans of the time. New Year's Day with them was the same day as the Persian and Afghan Newroz festival. Further, the degrees of initiation, although seemingly artificial ones coupled with some of the degrees of Freemasonry, were also 8. And there are parallels in the naming of the individual degrees. Like the Roshaniya, the Illuminati stated that they had the objective of gaining important converts for the purpose of improving the state of the world. A comparison of the degrees shows the similarity. In the Roshaniya, the seeker, and in the Illuminati, the apprentice. In the Roshaniya, the disciple; in the Illuminati, the fellow craft. In the Roshaniya, the devotee; in the Illuminati, the master. In the Roshaniya, the enlightened one; in the Illuminati, the Illuminatus major. In the Roshaniya, the master; in the Illuminati, the Illuminatus dirigens. In the Roshaniya, the commander or emir; and in the Illuminati, prince. In the Roshaniya, priest; in the Illuminati, priest. In the Roshaniya, king or chief; in the Illuminati, king. Now, the early stages of initiation were designed to admit people into the brotherhood, to test them for reliability, and possibly to train them for responsible tasks connected with the greater diffusion of knowledge. Even in higher degrees, it seems that tests are also applied. Those who were to become priests, for example, were taken to a secret place, where a throne stood, with before it the choice of priestly or royal regalia. The aspirant had to make the choice. Those who opted for the symbols of worldly power were dismissed promptly, but candidates taking up the sacred vestments were saluted with the phrase, "Hail, O Holy One." The members of this degree were considered teachers in whose hands was the training of disciples. Priests identified themselves with a secret sign. Both hands crossed were placed flat upon the head. In shaking hands, the priest extended his palm with the thumb held vertically upwards. The countersign was a fist with the thumb enclosed within it. Princes were those who could influence events at a very high level, either in academic or political affairs. The room in which the initiation to this high and secret degree was celebrated was hung with red. The garments which the prince was to wear were red and white. Now these are, of course, the colors of the Ishmaelis as well. In the ritual, the candidate is presented as a slave and states that he wants to liberate society from tyranny. The sign of the degree was the extending of both arms. As the countersign, before taking the hand of another, the prince gripped both his elbows. In 1786, a raid upon the house of an influential lawyer, Zwack, revealed secret papers connected with the order. And it is through those that many of the inner workings of the organization became known. Men were to be influenced through their women folk, and a large-scale plan for initiating women members was at an advanced stage of development. It has been widely claimed and touted that many of the charges which were made against the German Illuminati were false, and that the possession of instructions, for instance, on forging seals, was due to the fact that the lawyer Zwack had a collection devoted to that subject, as a matter of legal interest to him. It is also said that the project of enrolling women and young girls had in actual fact been taken from the aims of a very different society, the Mopses. While this matter still remains open, however, one may as well examine some of the documents which are stated to have belonged to the society. Zwack had written, in his own hand, a document describing the manufacture of a strong box which would blow up if it were tampered with. He also had a collection of impressions of the seals of several hundred important persons, and the already mentioned data on how to forge or substitute them. These, he stated in a letter of protest, were a part of the exhibits of his criminological collection. The famous memorandum detailing the plan to win over women to the cause comes from papers seized at the home of Baron Bassus, one of the members. The document states that women are the best means of influencing men. They should be enrolled, and into their minds put a hope that they might themselves in time be released from the tyranny of public opinion. Another letter asks how young women can be influenced, since their mothers would not consent to their being placed under the Illuminati for instruction. 5 women were suggested by one member as a start. They were 4 stepdaughters of one of the Illuminati, who were to be placed in the care of the wife of yet another illuminated one. They, in their turn, would enlarge the society through their friends. It was further mentioned that women are not considered to be really suitable for such an undertaking, because they are, quote, fickle and impatient, unquote. But the order was most sorely hit by the fact that something quite discreditable to the character of the founder was discovered, and it was thought that he might be trying to use the organization for personal reasons. Now, the establishment version goes something like this. Weishaupt, upon the suppression of the order, refused a pension which he was offered after he had been dismissed from his professorial chair. He attributed his downfall to the machinations of the Jesuits, whom he hated, and who had opposed him, as he was not of their number, whereas they considered the university post which he held to be a long-standing prerogative of their own. And nothing could be farther from the truth, for Adam Weishaupt was himself a Jesuit priest, holding a professorial chair at a Jesuit university. Now, he and Zwack were both banished, and little is heard of them thereafter, although there are rumors that they carried on the society respectively in Saxe-Coburg in the Netherlands. Another incident that you will not hear in establishment accounts is the story of the messenger riding from one Bavarian Illuminati lodge to another, who was literally struck by lightning, divine intervention if you will, struck dead from his horse, in his pouch carrying the papers of a secret plan to take over individual nations and ultimately the world, were put into the hands of the Bavarian government. And many of the portions of these papers are almost word for word what later became known as the protocols of the wise men. Illuminism had spread to France, however, some years before its suppression in Germany. Influential personages were members, many drawn from the ranks of the important Freemasons of Paris. As in the case of the German branch, it was soon alleged that they pursued terrible aims and practiced frightful orgies. An extract from a French book of the 1790s, La Secte des Illuminés, will give a fair idea of this. The huge chateau of Ermenonville near Paris was one of the chief lodges of the Illuminated. It belonged to the Marquis of Girardin, who protected Rousseau and later gave him a tomb on his estate. Saint Germain, the notable impostor, presided over it. He claimed to be 1,000 years old and to be able to make gold. He was said to be immortal, but strangely died in 1784. And even today, some Looney Tune wackos claim that they converse with Saint Germain, who's still alive, walking around in a modern-day suit and tie. Well, on the day of his initiation at the Chateau of Ermenonville, the candidate was conducted through a long, dark passage into an immense hall draped with black. There were faint lamps set around the room. There were men dressed as corpses in shrouds. There was an altar of human skeletons which stood in the center of a large hall, and in the darkness, in the flickering low lamplight, the priest conducting the initiation resembled ghostly forms moving through the hall, and everywhere there was the stench of some terrible odor. Two men dressed as specters always appeared and tied a pink band or ribbon which was smeared with blood around the forehead of the candidate. Upon this was an image of the Lady of Loretto. Does this sound familiar, ladies and gentlemen? A crucifix was placed in his hand and an amulet hung around his neck. He was asked to remove his clothes, and if he showed any hesitancy, his clothes were removed for him and laid upon a funeral pyre. Crosses of blood were smeared upon his body, and then his genitalia were tied with a ribbon or with string. Then frightening figures, covered with blood and mumbling strange incantations, approached and threw themselves down in prayer. After a long period of time, weeping, crying, wailing broke out as if a herd, a plethora of mourners were bereaved upon the death of their closest and deepest love. The funeral pyre burned brighter and brighter. All of the clothes of the initiate were consumed, and from behind or near this fire, one of the priests emerged almost as if he had taken form from the smoke of the pyre itself. And the 5 figures went into convulsions, and loud wailing and screaming took place. And then came the voice of someone concealed behind a curtain. These oaths which the candidate had to repeat. Quote, "In the name of the crucified one, I swear to sever all bonds which unite me with mother, brothers, sisters, wife, relatives, friends, mistress, kings, superiors, benefactors, or any other man to whom I have promised faith, service, or obedience." Quote, "I name the place in which I was born. Henceforth I live in another dimension, which I will not reach until I have renounced the evil globe which has been cursed by heaven. From now onwards I shall reveal to my new chief all that I have heard or found out, and I shall also seek out and observe things which might otherwise have escaped me. I honor the aqua tofana. It is a quick and essential medium of removing from the earth, through death or robbing them of their wits, of those who oppose truth, and those who try to take it from our hands. I shall avoid Spain, Naples, and all other accursed lands, and I shall avoid the temptation to betray what I have now heard. Lightning will not strike as rapidly as the dagger, which will reach me wherever I may be, should I betray my initiation." Unquote. Then a 7-branched candelabrum bearing 7 black candles was placed before the candidate, and a large bowl containing human blood. The candidate washed himself in the blood and drank a quantity of it. The string around his genitalia was removed, and then he was carried to a bath to undergo complete ablution. After this, he was given a meal composed of root vegetables. Now, folks, while it is possible that such ceremonies as this have actually taken place, and we know that they have, because it is the exact ceremony that George Bush underwent in the crypt, or what is known as the tomb, the Skull and Bones, at Yale University. But it will be recalled that such items as human blood are generally not of the genuine variety in any society other than those reputed to be dedicated to criminal or perverted ends. Well, I have this to say: no one knows but those who actually take part in the ceremony, whether it's chicken blood or human blood or pig blood or cow's blood. And as with the initiations of other societies, there is no doubt that the candidate may have been made to believe that he was actually going through an initiation which involved horrible things of this nature, such as human blood. Initiation into the ancient mysteries was often accompanied by the exposure of the candidate to fear and other emotions in order to make him receptive to the oath or message which was to be made manifest. It has been said, folks, that the European version of the Order of the Illuminati contributed in no small measure to the development of revolutionary doctrines which eventually culminated in the Russian and other communist machines. And in fact, for those of serious study who have perused the depths of the available material, as I and others have no doubt whatsoever that communism, international socialism, is the direct product of the mystery schools of the Illuminati, as was the formation of this nation, which was guaranteed to lead us in to what is known as the New World Order, Novus Ordo Seclorum, the formation of a one-world totalitarian state ruled by benevolent despotism, is the way that they put it. And there is little doubt that the order was dedicated to the overcoming of princely power, as it was then known, and to the diffusion of anti-religious ideas. And this can best be seen by examining the development of the teaching of the member as he progressed from one degree of initiation into the next. Now, folks, many young enthusiasts with a taste for mystery and a desire to fight oppression in any form were drawn through a deliberate plan from the ranks of all of the colleges and universities and from all of the other supposedly benevolent fraternal organizations. After an oath of obedience and silence had been extracted from the candidate, he was then handed over to a director or teacher, or, if you will, hierophant, to be taught that the order was one of discipline and effort, and that the final objectives were to do good through leaving aside all preconceived notions, and upon the basis of free thought, to lead mankind to salvation. But salvation granted by who? And salvation from what? That is the question that intelligent men should be asking. However, it's been my experience that most men and most women don't ask any questions whatsoever, or very few anyway. Those who managed to show that they were likely to accept the next stage in teaching were advanced to the rank in which he was made to swear that he would work under the orders of his masters without doubt or question. He would not use his critical faculties in any way, in any matter connected with such instructions. Now, in the lower ranks are the nursery for all you Blue Lodge Master Masons out there who think you know so much and are nothing more than the greatest group of followers ever conceived and let loose upon humanity. Yes, in the nursery, the member was very much in the dark as to the way in which the order was run and how it should accomplish its design of freeing the world. As he progressed, however, he found that a part of his service to the society was to gain financial and social power, and to place them at the disposal of the group. Indeed, he was expected to be a diligent Mason, and to try to gain control over Freemason funds. It was not until the 10th rite of promotion had been completed that the member was given, with the grade of priest, certain definite knowledge. And now today, in the order known as the Scottish Rite, this information is not given until the candidate actually reaches the 30th degree, according to the actual writings of the man who was the Grand Commander of all Freemasonry of the world and of the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry in the United States, Mr. Pike, General Pike. Well, this knowledge included the fact that the Illuminati were proposing to destroy princes and prelates throughout the world, and were to remove forever the feeling of local nationality from the minds of men. Another goal was to destroy all existing religions. The ways in which this was to be done involved infiltrating high positions in education, administration of government, the military, and, of course, the press. The very highest degrees showed that the rationalism and materialism of the thinkers who developed it were determined to stamp out all belief in religion, God, and any faith in a deity, the initiate was told, were human inventions, and they had no meaning whatsoever. Now, this was developed further, and the member who arrived at the highest position in the order, or that designated as Rex or King, learned that he was now the same as any king, on the same level, with the same rights and the same divine right of rule, and that all men were capable of equal advancement. But all men were not equal. Hence the need for kings over man was an illusion perpetrated by those in power, and this perpetration was to be broken at all costs. And the highest, or the man who sat at the head of the council of hidden supervisors, made up of 9 members, was designated as Rex Mundi, or literally translated, King of the World. In their machinations to overthrow, topple the kings and queens of all of the countries of the world from their thrones, they established the United States of America in the English colonies in the New World, and its ultimate goal, its secret destiny, was to be the catalyst to bring into the world what they called the Great Society, or the New World Order. And it certainly worked, dear listeners. As you can look back through history, the granting of the common man of liberty, fraternity, equality, freedom that he had never tasted or known before in history lit the spark that then ignited the French Revolution, of course, with the leadership and the manipulation of the people of the Illuminati, the lodges of Freemasonry, the Ancient Order of the Rose and Cross, and others. At the highest level were all the same, with the same goals. And this spark of revolution spread throughout the world. And until we all grow up and learn how to stop this, it will continue. As the secret societies propel us, manipulate us, deceive us, lie, operating in secret, infiltrating everything decent and good that man has ever built, destroying it from within, bringing closer and closer their goal of what they believe to be a utopia on earth, a one-world, totalitarian, socialist order. They hope to create the world where they will rule, as being the ones who possess the only truly mature minds. They will establish a council of advisors to a world charismatic political and religious leader who will be the outward rule, but he will really take his orders from this benevolent despotism, this council of learned elders, and everyone on the face of this earth will be under total control for every 24-hour period of their lives. There will be one world religion catering to the needs of man, not man obeying the laws of any god. The general rule will be, as has been touted many, many times by these people, do as thou wilt shall be the whole book, are familiar with it. I never enjoy being right when it involves the loss of life and human injury. Nevertheless, it is another chalk mark on the board, and I remain the most accurate predictor of future world events in the history of the world. The one that is about to come true and has not yet is the prediction that I made that the United States would send troops to Yugoslavia. And it appears that that is going to happen in the very near future. Anyway, we will see, won't we? As we move into the New World Order, and all of these events are planned to take us directly into one world totalitarian socialist government. To all those people in the city of New York who lost relatives, or who had friends or relatives that were injured, I offer you my deepest compassion, sympathy, and I wish that I could tell you that that was the end of it, but I can tell you that it is only the beginning. Unless people wake up, it will escalate, and there will be more. Don't forget, folks, Monday, March 15th, 8 p.m., Lafayette Hotel, 2223 El Cajon Boulevard in San Diego. I'll be there. I'll be giving a 3-hour presentation entitled The Sacrificed King on the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. I will connect it directly to the occult worship of Mystery Babylon, the secret societies, and specifically to the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, which really is just the outward form of the old Knights Templar. And I also have reason to believe, that the Sovereign and Military Order of the Knights of Malta was involved, which is just another branch of the old Templar order. So make sure that you're there. $40 is the admission fee. Unless you're a CAGI member, then the admission fee is $30. I managed to negotiate a 25% discount with the people who are putting this on and who have invited me to speak. If you're not a CAGI member, you can purchase advance tickets at the Controversial Bookstore in San Diego. If you are a CAGI member, you must buy your tickets at the event. That's the only way that we can get you the discount. If you'd like information on this whole conference, it's lasts the whole weekend. There's a lot of Looney Tunes stuff going on there. There are some good speakers. My workshop is Monday night, the last one of the whole conference, and it's not a workshop ticket, so it's a separate event altogether. But you can call and find out about the whole thing, just in case you want to go and spend the whole weekend. Call area code 619-492-8588. That's 619-492-8588. And we still need donations to pay for this airtime, folks. Come on, get out your checkbooks and your money orders and help us out here. Send your donation to Stan and make the checks or money orders out to WWCR, not to me. I don't want your money. It goes to pay for airtime. That's it, period. Send them to Stan, P.O. Box 889, Camp Verde, Arizona, 86322. That's Stan, P.O. Box 889, Camp Verde, Arizona, 86322. Tell him Bill sent you. And while you're at it, and even if you don't send a donation, write to Stan or call him and tell him you'd like to receive a packet of information. He'll be glad to send it to you. If you'd like to call him, his number is 602-567-6109. That's 567-6109. Please call him during normal waking hours. Stan's getting up there, and he likes to get his sleep, and I don't blame him. So please don't call him late in the evening or late at night. Let him have some of his own time. Call him during the day, during normal waking hours or early evening, please. Thank you very much for those of you who are doing that. Those of you who are not, please start. Well, let's continue where we left off. And this is about the society in the Middle East known as the Assassins. And we covered quite a bit of their history already. But this secret society, the most successful of secret societies, showed that its strength ultimately depended upon a powerful leader. Well, Kia Muhammad was no such leader. And little by little it became obvious that his own son, Hassan the Hated, was the stronger personality. Now remember, Kia Muhammad was the old man of the mountain, and the mountain lair was called the Eagle's Nest. Now Hassan, through some magnetic power, was able to capture the imagination of the assassins, soon having it believed that he himself was none other than the power of all powers, the hidden Imam, who had been mentioned by the first Grand Master, an incarnation of all greatness. So important was Hassan that he was the fountain of power, and others only held a very small measure of authority because he allowed them to have it, and for no other reason. This final absurdity was lapped up by members who had been conditioned to believe in things which were not, shall we say, exactly self-evident to the ordinary man. The doctrine of the all-powerful, invisible Imam was a part of Ishmaelism, and Hassan was ready, even during his early manhood, to assume the role. But since his father was able to assert himself by having some 250 of Hassan's followers murdered, he thought it wiser to hold his hand. In 1163, his chance came. Muhammad died, and Hassan II issued an order to all Ishmaelis to collect below the castle of Alamut. Never before had such an assembly of killers, fanatics, and dedicated perverters of the truth been seen. Hassan, probably in a state of megalomania, assured them that he had received a message from the Almighty, that is, from now, all the bonds of religion were loosed. Everyone might do as he liked. Later, in the modern age, we were to hear that again as, quote, the whole of the law shall be do as thou wilt, unquote. It was not necessary, he said, to keep up pretenses, and furthermore, he, Hassan, was none other than the hidden Imam. His word was law, and he was a form of the divinity, not merely relaying instructions from above, but the divinity. Now there was one further obstacle, folks. According to Ishmaeli doctrine, the hidden Imam was to be of the family of Hashim, the blood of Muhammad the Prophet. Such descendants were known and revered, and it was common knowledge that Hassan too was not one of them. He overcame this difficulty by stating that he was not in fact the true son of Kia Muhammad the Persian, but an adopted child of the caliphal family of Egypt. This pretense was carried on for 4 years, during which the crazed Hassan showed that he was not as mad as he might have been by consolidating quite efficiently the power of the cult. Eventually, he was assassinated by his brother-in-law, Namwar the Famous. Now the father-to-son succession seemed to be established. Muhammad II, son of Hassan II, began the cultivation of letters and sciences, which was to distinguish successive grandmasters of the order. It was a conceit of his in the time of the greatest flowering of Persian literature that he was supreme among poets and philosophers. He used his assassins also to drive this point well home. The Imam Razi, one of the greatest thinkers of the time, refused to acknowledge the assassins as the most advanced theologians, so Muhammad II sent an envoy to him promising either a swift death by dagger or a pension of several thousand gold pieces a year. Suddenly, oh yes, suddenly, the learned Imam's discourses seemed to lose their bite. One day soon afterwards he was asked why he did not attack the assassins as of old. "Because," said the old man with a nervous glance around the assembly where a murderer might lurk, "their arguments are so sharp and pointed," and indeed they were. For 35 years, Muhammad II ruled the Ismailis with a rod of iron. The only law was that of obedience to the assassin will. The observances of ritual Islam were abolished. A new star had risen, remember that star? A power to stiffen resistance to crusader penetration. Saladin, who was to become an implacable foe of the assassins. The Syrian branch of the cult grew in power, while the activities of the Eastern assassins were carried out much more quietly, with missionaries being sent to India, Afghanistan, even the remote Pamir Mountains which straddle China and Russia, where even today adherents of the sect are to be found. Saladin had overcome the other Ismaili branch, the original home of assassin Egypt, and restored the true faith to the people of the Nile. He now had enough booty for 10 years' war against the Crusaders in Palestine and troops to spare. His first task was to unify the forces of Islam, and this he determined to do by force, if necessary. Sinan, ancient of the assassin cult in Syria, decided to oppose this terrible enemy of the Fatimites. 3 assassins fell upon Saladin and nearly killed him. This made the sect a priority target for the Saracen chief. The old man of the mountain, for his part, who was now Muhammad II, now unleashed a succession of fanatics in every kind of disguise upon Saladin. And by 1176, Saladin decided that an end must be put to the cult. He invaded their territory and started to lay it waste when the assassin chief offered him freedom of action to fight the Crusaders and no further attempt upon his life, if the cult were spared. Now, these terms were agreed to, and henceforth no assassin ever again attempted to molest Sultan Saladin. This period introduces Sinan as yet another strange and terrible assassin leader. For he had decided that he was the incarnation of all power and deity, and that he would live the part. Sinan was never seen to eat or drink, sleep, or even to spit. Now, can you imagine this? A living human being, never seen to eat or drink, sleep, or even to spit. Between sunrise and sunset, he stood on a pinnacle of rock, dressed in a hair shirt, and preached his own power and glory to delighted assassins. Have you ever worn a hair shirt? Have you ever stood on a pinnacle of rock between sunrise and sunset? I mean, every sunrise and sunset? And wearing a hair shirt every sunrise and sunset? Well, folks, this is historic fact. This is not something that someone made up. Thus, at one and the same time, there were 2 chiefs of the order, each busily telling his own followers that he and he alone was God. Hassan in Persia, Sinan in Syria, each commanded legions of devoted killers, all committed by oath to follow his path. When Muhammad II died, he was succeeded by his son Jalaluddin, who completely reversed the orders that the assassins were to have no outward religious observances. You see, he felt that he could do a great deal by adopting the cloak of orthodox piety, and sent ambassadors far and wide to announce his maintenance of the true faith. He went so far as to curse his predecessors publicly in order to convince the incredulous that such a people as the assassins could turn over a new leaf. As a result of what would today be called a long-term and comprehensive propaganda plan, he was acknowledged as a religious leader by half the orthodox monarchs of Islam and the first assassin to be so styled, and came to be termed Prince Jalaluddin. Jalaluddin died in 1203 after 12 years of leadership of the cult, handing over to Aladdin, and you guys thought that was just a storybook tale, didn't you? Aladdin, a child of 9 years of age, weak, inefficient, stupid, Aladdin made little mark upon history, except in the classic tales of Arabia. The 1001 Arabian Nights. For Aladdin in the 1001 Arabian Nights is Aladdin, the leader of the assassins. It is said that his main activity was tending sheep, to which he was passionately attached, and he even had a small hut built in a sheepfold where he spent most of his time. Aladdin was extraordinarily cruel, in spite of the contact with the sheep, and continued to terrorize in time-honored fashion any person, great or small, who did not pay tribute or otherwise cooperate with the organization. And even today, those in power who are in contact with sheep most of the time ultimately turn out to be the same. And we all know who the sheeple are, don't we? The assassin's hands, ears, and eyes were everywhere. Once fully initiated, a man might be sent to a place 1,000 miles away to take up residence and live, waiting for the moment when orders came to him from Alamut to fulfill his fatal destiny, and all the while in between furnishing intelligence to the central headquarters of the assassins. A story is told of the court of the Shah of Khwarizm. Thus, quote, the Ismaili ambassador spent some time with the vizier one day after a splendid banquet, when the wine, which they had been drinking in violation of the law, had mounted into their heads. The ambassador told the vizier by way of confidence that there were several Ismailis among the pages, grooms, guards, and other persons who were immediately about the Sultan. The vizier, dismayed and at the same time curious to know who these dangerous attendants were, besought the ambassador to point them out to him, giving him his napkin as a pledge that nothing evil should happen to them. Instantly, at a sign from the envoy, 5 of the persons who were attendants in the chamber stepped forth, avowing themselves to be concealed assassins. On such a day, and at such an hour, said one of them, an Indian, to the vizier, I might have slain thee without being seen or punished, and if I did not do so, it was only because I had no orders from my superiors. Unquote. The vizier, of course, begged for his life, but word got to the Sultan, who ordered the assassins to be apprehended and burned alive, and the 5 chamberlains were cast on the flaming pyre, where they died exulting at being found worthy to suffer in the service of the great sheik of the mountain. So powerful was their devotion to the cult. The assassins had the last laugh, for an order arrived immediately afterwards from Alamut that the Shah must pay 10,000 pieces of gold as compensation for each man killed, which he did, or be killed himself. Another subsidiary activity which the assassins delighted in was the holding captive of Alamut of useful, rare, and distinguished personages who could be of value to them in educational, military, or other spheres, and one was a physician, another a famous astronomer, a third the greatest painter in Persia, who worked to the order of the chief alone. The end of a chapter was near. For the Mongol hordes under Halaku, lieutenant of Chinggis, were steadily destroying all the civilization of Islam which lay in their inexorable path westwards. Rukneddin, son of Aladdin, succeeded him and tried at first to turn the Mongol tide. After a series of encounters, pitched battles, intrigues, and counter-intrigues, Rukneddin was taken. He played for time as long as he could, but he was eventually murdered in his own turn by the victorious Mongol chief's men. Assassin power in Persia was broken, and what remained of the members were ordered none knows by whom, to conceal their faith and await a signal that the cult was in full operation again, Alamut was silenced, and the Syrian headquarters alone remained. And if it had not been for the refusal of the Christian kings in Europe to send ambassadors to make a treaty for a new crusade with the Mongol horde, then all of Islam would have been decimated. But it was not. For the Christian kings, even though they would have liked to regain their foothold in the Middle East, had problems of their own and ignored the Mongol emissaries. It was a long time until the Mamluk Sultan of Egypt was able to overcome the Mongol thrust. In 1260, however, he carried the banners of Islam victoriously against them and restored the fortress of Alamut and other properties to the assassins, who were strongly surviving underground. They soon found that they had exchanged one master for another, for the Egyptians were now employing them for their own purposes and required them to undergo a new initiation, that of the ancient Egyptian mysteries of Babylon. Ibn Battuta, the great traveler of the 14th century, found them well entrenched in their former strong places, being used as the, quote, arrows of the Sultan of Egypt, with which he reaches his enemies, unquote. The supposed suppression of the creed which followed the Mongol destruction did not, in fact, take place. Copying each other, historians have asserted that Assassinism died 600 years ago. Nothing could be further from the truth. Now and again, however, fresh facts of their continued existence still come to light. In the 18th century, an Englishman, the British consul at Aleppo in Syria, was at pains to make this better known. He said, quote, "Some authors assert that these people were entirely extirpated in the 13th century by the Tartars, but I, who have lived so long in this infernal place, will venture to affirm that some of their spawn still exists in the mountains that surround us, for nothing is so cruel, barbarous, and execrable that is not acted and even gloried in by these cursed assassins," unquote. The assassins were widely dispersed throughout Asia. The rise of the thugs, the secret society of assassination of India, followed the Mongol invasion of Persia. Indeed, at least one of the thug recognition signals, Ali Bahai Salam, indicates salutations to Ali, the descendant of the prophet most greatly revered by the assassins. Ismailis, not all of them recognizing the one chief, reside in places as far apart as Malaya, East Africa, and Ceylon. They would not necessarily feel that they are assassins in the same sense as the extremists who followed the old sheiks of the mountains, but at least some of them revere the descendants of the lords of Alamut to the extent of deification. The modern phase of Ismailism dates from 1810, when the French consul at Aleppo found that the assassins in Persia recognized as their divinely inspired chief a reputed descendant of the 4th Grand Master of Alamut, who then lived at Kek, a small village between Isfahan and Tehran. This Shah, Khalilullah, quote, was revered almost like a god and credited with the power of working miracles. The followers of Khalilullah would, when he pared his nails, fight for the clippings. The water in which he washed became holy water. The sect next appeared to the public gaze through an odd happening. In 1866, a law case was decided in Bombay. There is in that city a large community of commercial men known as Kohas. A Persian, the record tells us, Aga Khan Mehalati, a native of Mehalat, a place situate near Kek, had sent an agent to Bombay to claim from the Khojas the annual tribute due from them to him, and amounting to about 10,000 English pounds. The claim was resisted, and the British court was appealed to by Aga Khan. Sir Joseph Arnold investigated his claim. The Aga proved his pedigree, showing that he had descended in a direct line from the 4th Grand Master of Alamut, and Sir Joseph declared it proved. And it was further demonstrated by the trial that the Kohas were members of the ancient sect of the Assassins, to which sect they had been converted 400 years before by an Ishmaelite missionary who composed a work which has remained the sacred book of the Kohas. In the first Afghan war, the then Aga Khan contributed a force of light cavalry to the British forces. For this he was awarded a pension. Hitti, in his History of the Arabs, notes, page 448 in 1951 edition, that the assassin sect known as Kothas and Malwas gave over 1/10 of their revenues to the Aga Khan, who spends most of his time as a sportsman between Paris and London. The influence of the new form of organization and training, as well as initiatory techniques of the assassins upon later societies, has been remarked by a number of students, and I have found in my research that it's absolutely true. That the Crusaders knew a good deal about the Ismailis is shown from the detailed descriptions of them which survive. Esh Amir Ali, an Orientalist of considerable repute, goes further in his assessment. Quote, "From the Ismailis, the Crusaders borrowed the conception which led to the formation of all the secret societies, religious and secular, of Europe. The institutions of Templars and Hospitallers, the Society of Jesus, founded by Ignatius Loyola, composed by a body of men whose devotion to their cause can hardly be surpassed in our time. The ferocious Dominicans, the milder Franciscans, may all be traced either to Cairo or to Alamut. The Knights Templar, especially, with their system of Grand Masters, Grand Priors, and religious devotees, and their degrees of initiation, bear the strongest analogy to In the year 1110, a mysterious order called the Priory de Sion appeared upon the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. This mysterious secret order, the Priory de Sion, was eventually to crown the first king, the first Christian king of Jerusalem. When they appeared on the Temple Mount in 1110, they recruited 9 knights to comb, to scour the Temple Mount, the passages and caverns and tunnels beneath, for the ancient remains of the relics of the religion. Later, in AD 1118, 9 knights, supposedly concerned for the welfare of pilgrims to the Holy Land, bound themselves together in the creation of a knightly order. This order, again, existing of 9 knights, just like the original 9 knights, were commissioned by the Priory de Sion. In under 200 years, folks, this organization had become one of the most powerful single entities, if not the greatest power ever to exist in Europe. They were the first international bankers, the first that ever existed in the world. A few years later, it was utterly destroyed. They say, however, as you're going to find out, they were not destroyed at all, but merely driven underground. The zeal of religion, the conditioning which made men support a dedicated cause with all of their might, was likewise the instrument of their destruction. Nothing less than religious fervor could have smashed the order, as nothing less could have created it. And folks, you're going to find it difficult to believe, but the rise of this order and the destruction, at least publicly, of this order has such a great bearing on events today that you could say that everything that has happened since has been brought about by this one series of acts. Were the Knights Templar devil worshippers? Secret Saracens indulging in obscene orgies? Did they adore a head, spit on the cross, use the words Yallah, which means literally in Arabic, O Allah, in their rituals? Did they learn their ways from the terrible sect of the Assassins? Well, yes, folks, they did. And they are the link, at least in that day, would have been considered the modern link between the ancient mystery religion of Babylon and Europe. For the religion had come to Europe long, long before the Templars ever emerged and made their appearance in the ancient worship of the sun by the Druids and the Celts and the tribes, the Germanic tribes, who had made their way thousands of years ago, from the Middle East, up through Asia, across Russia, and into Europe. They brought Mystery Babylon with them and practiced it as what we know now today as the pagan religion. And Stonehenge is actually an ancient Babylonian temple of the sun. And you will find how all this connects later. But the origin of this was lost, and the ability to control large numbers of people by the use of the hidden knowledge of the ages was lost. It wasn't until the Knights Templar bought and brought the mystery religion of Babylon to Europe that the ancient worship of the sun again took hold amongst the Christian countries in the guise of Christianity, which was itself, at that time, I'm not talking about the teachings of Christ now, I'm talking about the perversion of the teachings of Christ, the melding of the teachings of Christ with the ancient worship of the sun, the mystery religion of Babylon, which became the Catholic Church, was indeed another branch of the ancient mystery religion of Babylon. Now, some of you out there may be confused on all of this. If you've been listening from the beginning of this series, then you're right on target. You're not confused. You know exactly what I'm talking about. If you've picked up this series somewhere in the middle, then you need to call Stan and order the studio quality tapes. They're in stereo. They're on TDK tapes. They are first quality tapes and crystal clear. You need to order this series from the first tape, the very first. And that was broadcast on February the 12th, I believe, a Friday. But anyway, Stan will know. Give him a call at 602-567-6109. That's 602-567-6109. Or write to Stan and ask him for an information packet at P.O. Box 889, Camp Verde, Arizona, 86322. That's P.O. Box 889, Camp Verde, Arizona, 86322. Now, folks, the original objective of the Order of the Temple, the Knights Templar, which immediately became the subject of applause throughout Christendom, was to combine the two functions of monk and knight, to live chastely and fight the Saracens with the sword and spirit. The sweet Mother of God, at least outwardly they say, was chosen as their patroness, and they bound themselves to live in accordance with the rules of St. Augustine, electing as their first leader Hugh de Payens. Now, King Baldwin II granted them a part of his palace to live in and gave them a grant towards their upkeep. Now, the part of the palace that they lived in was actually an ancient mosque, which was built upon the actual location of the old Temple of Solomon on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. The Knights Templar vowed to consecrate their swords, arms, strength, and lives to the defense of the mysteries of the Christian faith, to pay complete and utter obedience to the orders of the Grand Master, to fight whenever commanded, regardless of perils, for the faith of Christ as they understood it. Among the vows taken were those which forbade their yielding even a foot of land to the enemy, whoever the enemy was, and not to retreat, even if attacked, in the proportion of 3 to 1. They chose the name Militia Templi, Soldiers of the Temple, after the temple supposedly built by Solomon in Jerusalem, near which they had been assigned quarters by the king, but in reality had nothing to do with the Temple of Solomon. Some say that the Templars derived their idea of their order from that of the Hospitallers who looked after Catholic pilgrims to Palestine, for there was little hospitality to be had from the native Orthodox Christians of those parts. Others hold that there was an even older order from which they received their inspiration. No reliable evidence on this point is, however, available according to the, quote, establishment, unquote, historians. although for those who really research the true history of the secret orders, and specifically the Knights Templars, there's a direct connection to the assassins and the Roshaniya. Although the Templars were so poor that 2 men had to share a horse, they say, but that is not true at all, and their seal commemorated this decades after they became one of the richest communities of their time, they soon attracted favorable notice and support. Now, the 2 knights riding the horse was a symbol of sacrifice. It denoted their vows of poverty. In truth, each knight not only had a horse, but he had what they called a yeoman. He had a spare horse, he had a pack horse, and he had several horses in reserve, and a whole train of servants. But the Knights Templar were the first true, as we know it in modern times. In modern times, there were others before, but they are the first true in modern times. By modern, I say, from the time that Europe escaped from the old tribal paganism. In other words, in the year 1110, I consider that the beginning of the modern age, although historians may disagree with me. It's the beginning of everything that's ever happened since, and everything that's happening today can be traced right to the door of the Knights Templar. And that's why I say that. They were the first modern order to practice what we now know as true communism. They were the ones who brought international socialism into Europe, which has always been the tenet and the creed of the mystery religion of Babylon. Only 1 year after their establishment, Fulk, Count of Anjou, who had come to Jerusalem on a pilgrimage, joined as a married member and gave them an annual grant of 30 pounds of silver. This example was soon followed by other devout Western princes. For the first 9 years of their existence, the knights continued to live a life of chastity and poverty in accordance with their vows. They adopted a striped white and black banner called the Busant, after their original piebald horse, and this word also became their battle cry. Special raiment they had none, and they wore whatever clothes were given to them by the pious, but little by little, as one writer puts it, they were to become haughty and insolent. And the black and white banner, the translation of the meaning of which was for the, again, exoteric. For the real meaning of the black and white banner was the meaning of the androgynous God, the positive, the negative, the black and the white, the yin and the yang. The male and the female combined into one, and that was the real meaning of the black and white banner. And it's carried forth today on the floor of many of the temples of Freemasonry, where the black and white checkered pattern exists, and in one famous cathedral in Europe, built by the Knights Templar. They disguised their esoteric religion in an exoteric manner that would be accepted by Christianity. Baldwin of Jerusalem, who had been a prisoner in the hands of the Saracens and knew of their disunity, realized at about this time that Islam must eventually unite against the Christian invasion, and he decided that the Templars would prove ideal allies in the battles which were to come. In 1127, therefore, he sent 2 Templars with his strong recommendation to the Pope, applying for official recognition of the order by the Holy See. And this is the first time that the Templars even were considered to be close to the center of religion, the Christian religion in that day, the Catholic Church, the Pope. For they were not commissioned as a Christian order. They were not commissioned by the Pope or by the Church. And this is a big myth that the Knights Templar started out to protect the Church and protect the pilgrims on their way to Jerusalem. They were established first, primarily and foremost, as a branch of the ancient order of the religion of Mystery Babylon. And it's indicative of the strategies that they've used since to endear themselves to whatever the established power or the beliefs of the majority of the people might be. When they went to see the Pope, they had an introduction to Saint Bernard himself, the abbot of Clairvaux, who was known to be an admirer of theirs and who was a nephew of one of their envoys. Then the Grand Master himself arrived in Europe and received the eulogistic opinion of the abbot. Quote, "They go not headlong into battle, but with care and foresight, peacefully, as true children of Israel. But as soon as the fight is begun, they rush without delay upon the foe and know no fear. One is often put to flight 1,000, 2, 10,000, gentler than lambs and grimmer than lions. Theirs is the mildness of monks and the valor of the knight." Unquote. Now, folks, this was a strong recommendation, and this testimonial was a part of the campaign to help the Templars in their efforts at recognition by the Pope. All of you who have thought that they began as a religious order in the first place are so way off base that it's pathetic. And neither were the Jesuits a religious order in the first place, but we'll get that together in another broadcast. But on the 31st of January in the year 1128, the Master appeared before the Council of Troyes. Now, this formidable body consisted of the archbishops of Rheims and Sens, 10 bishops, and a number of abbots, including Saint Bernard himself, presided over by the Cardinal of Albano, the papal legate. They were approved, and Pope Honorius chose for them a white mantle, completely plain. The red cross was added by order of Pope Eugenius III in 1146. And see, you thought the Templars thought of this. Nope, not at all. This was mandated by 2 popes. First, a white mantle, completely plain, and then later the red cross was added by order of Pope Eugenius III in 1146. Hugh de Payens now took his delegation through France and England and collected a number of recruits. Gifts and grants were showered upon the order. Lands, rents, and arms were forthcoming from all quarters. Richard I of England was enthusiastic about them. By 1133, King Alfonso of Aragon and Navarre, who had fought the Spanish Moors in 29 battles, had willed his country to them. Although when the Moors finally laid him low, his nobles prevented the Templars from claiming their rights. Nevertheless, this was a great honor. In fact, to my knowledge and to our research into history, it had never before been done. In 1129, the Master, accompanied by 300 knights recruited from the noblest houses of Europe, led a huge train of pilgrims to the Holy Land. It was at this time that the Templars formed part of the Christian contingent, which, allied with the assassins, tried to take Damascus. And it wasn't the first time nor the last that the Christian Knights Templar, or supposedly Christian Knights Templar, they really weren't Christian at all, were allied with the assassins. Were they, as the Orientalist von Hammer alleges, connected in some secret way with the assassins? Yes, our research shows that it is a historical fact. And it is also an historical fact that the assassins were prepared to adopt Christianity if they could gain greater power thereby. Christianity, that is, on the surface, just as the Knights Templar had done. Hammer points to the similarity of the two organizations. The followers of Hassan ibn Sabah were in contact with the Templars and had a similar method of organization. They were in existence before the Templars were formed. The Ishmaelites, the Ishmaelians, or assassins, was the original. And folks, the Order of the Templars was the copy. The balance of Western opinion is against this contention. more particularly because one feels from wide reading of historians great sympathy is felt for the cruelly treated and arbitrarily disposed Templars. Thus, Kitely, who made a close study of the order, attacks those who would claim that the Templars were an assassin branch, but when you do research into the associations and memberships of Kitely, you'll find that Kitely was himself a Knight Templar. And he said, quote, "When nearly 30 years after their institution, the Pope gave them permission to wear a cross on their mantle, like the rival Hospitaller order, no color could present itself so well suited to those who daily and hourly exposed themselves to martyrdom as that of blood, in which there was so much of what was symbolical. With respect to internal organization at will, we apprehend, be always found that this is for the most part of the growth of time and the product of circumstances, and is always nearly the same where these last are similar," unquote. And you find this kind of rhetoric and semantics all through the writings of those who wish to cover the true origin and the true meaning of Mystery Babylon. The famous question of the 3,000 gold pieces paid by the Syrian branch of the assassins to the Templars is another matter, which has, of course, never been settled. One opinion holds that this money was given as a tribute to the Christians, the other that it was a secret allowance from the larger to the smaller organization, which it really was, as the assassins wished to expand their control. And remember, their original goal was to take over the entire world by the systematic infiltration and control of each individual country. Those who think that the assassins were just fanatical Muslims and therefore would not form any alliance with those who to them were infidels should be reminded that to the followers of the old man of the mountain, only he was right, and the Saracens who were fighting the holy war for Allah against the Crusaders were as bad as anyone else who did not accept the assassin doctrine. And it is true today. Quote, "If you are not one of us, you are nothing," unquote. Quote, "The ends justify the means," unquote. Quote, "The strength of our order exists in the fact that we manifest ourselves under many different names and many different occupations, and sometimes even seen to oppose ourselves, but at the highest level we are of one mind," unquote. And I could go on and on and on, and you all know that I can go on and on and on, for I've studied this for so many years that I eat, drink, and sleep it. Oh, yes. Well, eventually grave charges against the Templars during the Crusades included the allegation that they were fighting for themselves alone. And more than one historical incident bears this out. The Christians had besieged the town of Ascalon in 1153 and were engaged upon burning down the walls with large piles of inflammable